again, everyone. Welcome to the Philly Factor. My name is Paul Perrello. There are those names in Philadelphia that are synonymous with Philadelphia, even perhaps years after maybe they have faded into the history books. You could bring up names like William Penn, obviously, John Wanamaker, Strawbridges, Gimbels, Lip Brothers, and it just brings us back to a different time and a different place. One of those names in particular is the focus of this edition of the Philly Factor. My guest is Margaret Strawbridge Butterworth. She is the author of Philadelphia's Strawbridge and Clothier, From Our Family to Yours. And Margaret, Meg, joins us on the program. Meg, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I think you would agree, although the Strawbridge name is so deeply rooted in the history of Philadelphia. If you were to go down to 8th and Market in Philadelphia today and see the building, people still refer to it as Strawbridge's. It's just one of those names and one of those buildings that is ingrained in the psyche of Philadelphians. And, you just look across the street, what was the Lip Brothers building, and then you look across Market Street, and there is this last time I was there was a parking lot there that was once home to Gimbels. But
Yes.
Strawbridge's is one of those names that is so rich with history in Philadelphia, and you are part of that family, the Strawbridge family. Can you give us an idea of how you relate to the lineage of Strawbridge?
I am the daughter of Francis Strawbridge, and he was chairman of the board for Strawbridge and Clothier at the time of its sale in 1996. He had a long career with the company, and his great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, was Justice Strawbridge, who was one of the two co-founders of the company, Justice Strawbridge, along with Isaac Clothier. So that is my relation. And I was born here in Philadelphia, and born and raised in Philadelphia. I currently live in Seattle, Washington, though.
As I said, the name Strawbridge is so deeply ingrained in the history of Philadelphia, so much so that you decided to write a book about Strawbridge and Clothier. Given the fact that you are part of the Strawbridge family, what motivated you then to finally write a book about this iconic name and retailer in Philadelphia?
Well, a few things. It's actually something that's been on my mind for a long time. I mean, probably going back 10 years, I've had it in my head that I wanted to somehow capture this history and honor it in some way. And I wasn't too sure exactly how to do that. But in 2019, I flew back to Philadelphia in December of 2019 because there was a special ceremony for the installation of the historical marker that was installed at the corner of 8th and Market Street in front of the former flagship store of Strawbridge and Clothier. It is a City of Philadelphia historical marker that was installed to honor the history of the store. And so I flew back for this ceremony. And as you can imagine, there were several former employees of the company who showed up for the ceremony. And I spoke with some of them, and it was really lovely speaking to them and hearing some of their memories. And then shortly after that event, I learned that there is a Facebook page for former Strawbridge and Clothier employees, as well as former Clover store employees. And so I signed up for the Facebook pages, and, people post on a fairly regular basis to both the pages, and both of the pages, I should say, have about like 500 or 600 members. So they're quite large. And people post on fairly regular basis, what they did for the company and just, fun memories, photographs, memorabilia. And I thought, wow, this would be a wonderful way to tell the history of the company, try to capture as many of these employee memories as possible into a book and recount the history of the company from beginning to end, but really highlighting the employee experience and as a way to honor the employees, because the store could not been the success that it was without the employees. And at the same time, it was as you mentioned, a family-run business. But family, not just referred to the Strawbridge family and the Clothier family, it referred to everyone who worked for the company. So everyone who worked for the company, regardless of your position, was considered part of the store family. So that was kind of my light bulb moment, was attending that ceremony in December of 2019, and then learning about the Facebook page, and then, of course, the pandemic happened. And so this kind of became a pandemic project. And I just started reaching out to people and asking if anyone wanted to speak to me and share their memories and stories from their time with the company.
I recall being in lifelong Philadelphia when word came down that Strawbridge and Clothier was going out of business. It sort of resonated with everyone, whether you shopped at the store or didn't shop at the store, or one of the other satellite stores throughout the greater Philadelphia area. And it just seemed like the whole landscape of retail in Philadelphia was changing. First, I think, with Wanamaker's announcing that they were closing, going out of business, and they were, I think maybe even before Wanamaker's, it was Lit Brothers and Gimbels that had announced. And the whole, we think of brick and mortar, we think of how that changes the landscape, but then we think about all the people that truly love their jobs at these department stores. And you talk about the Strawbridge family. I mean, there's the bloodline, of course, and then there are all these other people that, Strawbridge and Clothier would not have been able to last as long in business if it wasn't for the people working on the fourth floor, working on the first floor, whatever floor they worked on, and whatever job that they did, they were such a vital part of the Strawbridge and Clothier story.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll just add, in researching this book and speaking to so many people, I interviewed over 40 former employees of both Strawbridge's and the Clover store division. I learned so much about the history of the company, but also just what was involved with running this very large operation on a day-to-day basis, and how many people were required to make, as I say in the book, the machine keep running. And just, all the different positions that were involved in making those doors open at the beginning of the day and close at the end of the day.
And you would know perhaps best, there was a loyal customer base too. I mean, from, again, growing up, you either shopped at store A or store B, and very rarely did the people from Wanamaker's make their way all the way down Market Street to shop at Strawbridge's. I mean, they had their distinct territories, and with that came, distinct clientele that shopped the stores. And it wasn't until, much later, when they all started to go out of business, that people were forced to look at other places to shop. But I guess there was a very loyal. Not only were the employees affected by the closing of Strawbridge and Clothier, but it was the people that shopped there too that were sad to see this institution go away.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And as you said, many of the employees were also customers too, right? So, and you're right too about saying that. I think, hey, Philadelphia, going back several decades, was a retail center, and we had several different department stores, big department stores, Wanamaker's, Strawbridge's, Lit Brothers. Before that, we had Snellenberg's, and even before that, Frank and Cedar. So we had a lot of different stores with different types of merchandise and catering to different types of customers. So you're right to say that, there was, each store kind of had their customer base and supporters, I guess. And certainly when Strawbridge's closed or was sold in 1996, it was the last independently run, family-owned department store, big department store, actually in the country at that time, certainly in the city, in the country. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So all of those lifelong customers and generational customers, yeah, that was, a void, unfortunately, opened up for them.
Um, let's take a trip down. Yeah. If we can take a trip down memory lane, back into the humble beginnings of Strawbridge and Clothier. These two men that founded this retail empire. I mean, how did they come together? What made them? And was their first store there at 8th and Market?
Yes, so that's a great question. So actually, Justice Strawbridge, he had entered the world of retail at a young age. He was about 15, I believe, when he started working for a small dry goods company in the city in Philadelphia. And then as he became a young man, he decided he wanted to open up his own dry goods store. And in those days, they were called dry goods stores. Department stores were not yet on the scene. They were small stores selling dry goods, so linens, cloth, etc. So he opened up a small dry goods store called J.C. Strawbridge and Company in 1861. He opened it up with another gentleman, so he had a partner. And it was at the corner of 8th and Market Street. It was at that same location where the big store is today that we associate with Strawbridge and Clothier. There was at that same location, 8th and Market Street. It was a small red brick building. They just sold merchandise on the ground floor because in those days, customers did not like to climb stairs. And of course, there were no elevators. And so he ran that. And at that time, so 1861, 1862, Isaac Clothier was a cloth salesman, wholesalesman, and he sold his cloth to Justice at his dry goods store. So the two men got to know each other that way, and they were the same age. They were, well, I guess at this time in their late 20s. And they formed a working relationship and developed a friendship. Like I said, they're about the same age. They also were both practicing Quakers. So they shared those Quaker values. So then by 1868, Justice's former partner left the relationship. And so Justice was looking for a new business partner, and it made sense to him to ask Isaac to go into business with him. And Isaac said yes. And so, yeah, so that's what it all happened. That was July of 1868. They signed a contract, and they actually tore down that little red brick building at 8th and Market Street and rebuilt a larger building over the course of the summer. So in September of 1868, the doors formally opened to the new Strawbridge and Clothier building. Yeah. And then they remained, obviously business partners, but also friends throughout the course of their lives.
When you decided to take on this project, I'm sure there are things that you learned about your family, personally as well as business-wise, that perhaps you didn't realize before. I mean, I think when anybody goes on a mission like this, you sort of unearth or uncover some information. You're like, gee, I didn't know that, or this is the first time I'm hearing about this. And with obviously many of the members of the Strawbridge family not around, or maybe you went through old diaries or notes that they kept. Was there anything that stood out that was so remarkable to you, something that you found out and learned that you didn't know?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind would be my uncle Stockton Strawbridge. He became president of the company in the mid 1950s. And after being president, he was then chairman of the board and then chairman of the executive committee. He didn't actually retire from the company until, 1990, I think, or the early 90s. So he really devoted his career and his life to the company. And I certainly knew him. I have very fond memories of him. And he always had a very big personality. but I knew that he was very important to the company. And I also knew that he was important to the city as well. He's very civically engaged and involved. I did not really fully appreciate or understand the extent of that until I started doing until I started researching this book. And I definitely think I walked away with a newfound appreciation for his work for the company, his love for the city, and the work that he did to really try to revive Market Street at that time during the 1970s and 80s. And just really how important the city was to him.
Is it true that one of the perhaps most famous employees of Strawbridge's was at the time a relatively unknown comedian, but would go on to bigger and better things? Is it true that W.C. Fields actually worked for Strawbridge's?
Yeah, I didn't know that either, but he did. My understanding is for a brief period of time, and he was quite young. And I believe he quickly realized this is not the line of work for him. And then he went off, to make his name in Hollywood. But yeah, he did for a brief period of time.
Well, I'm sure when the decision was made by the board that they were going to cease operations and sell the business, that ripple effect that ran through not only the community, not only through the city, but through the employees. This was not something that was taken lightheartedly. I mean, in reading about Strawbridge's and reading in your book, I mean, this was a difficult decision for them to make, and that's why this book, to a certain degree, really not only pays tribute to the Strawbridge family, but also to the employees that worked there, that had so much invested in the company, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
What was the feedback or what was the reaction amongst family members, Meg, when you announced, or maybe you didn't announce and you just surprised them all with this book being published, but what was the reaction when word got out that you were writing this book?
Well, when I first got the idea to write the book, I, of course, ran it by my father, Francis Strawbridge, who I should say recently passed away. So thank you for having me on your show to speak, because it's a nice way to, continue to remember him.
Sure.
So yeah, I initially asked him basically to feel him out to see if he would be okay with me writing a book, and kind of took him a little bit to really grasp the idea, because actually a book had been written about the company, but like in 1968, so it's no longer in publication, and of course there's a whole other history that continued after 1968. So I really wanted to get, from beginning to end, the history of the company. And I think he was he wasn't too sure who really would be interested in reading about that. But then he came to better understand, like I said, that I really wanted to focus on the employee experience as much as possible and share those memories. And he liked that idea. And then I also spoke to my cousin, Peter Strawbridge, who was the president of Strawbridge Clothier at the time of the sale in 1996. And so once I got their blessing, so to speak, then I started really moving full steam ahead with it. And I really had to consult with both Peter and my father, and Stephen Strawbridge, and my other cousin, and my uncle David Strawbridge. I feel so fortunate that they, while I was researching this book, were all available to me, and I could interview them all about their experience with the company, and their career paths with the company. And then also cousins of my generation who began working for the company as members of the fifth generation. I was fortunate to be able to speak with them, and I share some of their stories in the book as well. So yeah, I mean, my family members knew about it for over the course of my, from beginning to end. It was about a 3-year project, and I was in pretty regular contact with several family members about it.
Was there, and maybe the timing of this doesn't align all that well, but was there ever any plan or any desire on your part to go into the family business, or were you young enough at that point that perhaps the store was already changing hands at that point, even before you were of age to decide that you wanted to jump into
Um,
the family business?
yes, that's a good question. So when I was a little kid, I used to have ambitions of becoming the first woman chairman of the board for Strawbridge Clothier. But that didn't happen. And really, honestly, by the time I was in high school and college, I know retail really was not of interest to me, and I had other ideas. So I never did work there. I never had like a summer job in high school or college. A few of my cousins did. Um, but yeah, I did not. And then in 1996, when the company was sold, I was in college. I was a junior in college. So yeah, even if I had decided that I wanted to go into retail later on, at least with Strawbridge Clothier, that opportunity would not be there.
Yeah. What we have a few minutes left, Meg, but what has this, and you mentioned the passing of your father, and our condolences on your loss. And in some way, this is really this book, and this even the show is in tribute to him for all his hard work with Strawbridge and Clothier. But what has this whole experience then meant to you? Putting all this, blood, sweat, and tears into this book. I'm sure it wasn't easy in some regards, but what has this whole experience meant for you?
You're gonna make me tear up now. It's been a gift. And I haven't actually thought of it in that way or used those words to describe it until really just now. But as you asked me that question, I think I do realize it's been a real gift. I think the way it timed out was a gift, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to talk to my father and my uncle, who also passed away a couple years ago, and other people involved with the company who weren't part of my family, but were very much devoted to the company and devoted their entire careers to the company, who I had the good fortune to interview and who are sadly no longer with us today. I'm so thankful, so grateful that I embarked on this project when I did, and I was able to complete it when I did, so that my father could see it.
This is a book that whether you shopped at Strawbridge's, whether you worked at Strawbridge's, whether you're from Philadelphia or maybe out the suburbs, wherever you're seeing this program right now, it is a book for you to pick up and to dive into. It is well done, and it really gives us a snapshot of the retail history of this department store chain, and the history of a bygone era. And I think, Meg, you would agree that given the history of Strawbridge and Clothier, you don't see department stores or family-oriented department stores today that were anything like or even come close to what Strawbridge and Clothier was.
I think that's true. I think that's a true statement. I think it definitely was a bygone era. And that's another reason why I wanted to write the book. I say quite often to people who ask me that question, why did you write this book? I do feel like I'm a Gen Xer, and I do feel like my generation, and probably some older millennials too, were the last generation to really have vivid memories of what it was like to shop in your cities, your regions, department store, because that's how it used to be. Most major cities across the country had their department store, which many of them started out as family-run operations. They didn't necessarily end that way. But yeah, so those stores were part of the city, the region's identity, and they catered to the needs and the desires of those of that community. You could see it in their merchandise, how they picked their merchandise and bought their merchandise to sell in their stores. Today, we don't have that anymore. Department stores, well, there are really only a couple of department stores really anymore. And the merchandise it's all very homogenous. So we kind of, in terms of retail, we've lost that local flavor for big retail. We've lost that.
I want to thank you for your time, Meg. It's been a fascinating half hour talking about your book. I want to thank you for being with us and continued success. And again, this pays tremendous tribute to not only the Strawbridge and Clothier family, but also the people that were the lifeline for the stores. Thanks so much for being with us, Meg.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real treat.
Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Perrello. Thanks so much for being with us here on this edition of the Philly Factor. We'll catch you next time around.